Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's edition of Wild Wednesday webinar. I'm your host, Paul Kiewit. I'm the Executive Director of MIPA, and these webinars are brought to you in collaboration of several regional associations, including TISPA, OPA, MIPA, PPA Chicago, PPAW, UMAP, PPA Midwest, and the Arizona Promotional Products Association. Today's webinar is worth one CAS credit. There'll be a survey at the end of the webinar as you check out at the end of the meeting. If you take that survey, leave your PIN number, I will submit it to PPAI to get your credit for it. If you don't know your PIN number, ask your local regional executive director to get that for you. You'll notice on the left side of your screen, there's a chat box. If you have some questions for Lisa while she's presenting, you can type those into there. I'll be monitoring it, and I'll interrupt her if I think it's worthy of interruption. I'd like you to mark your calendars for next month, November 30, when we have a very special guest, myself. I'll be presenting How to Sell to Any Generation on November 30. It's always a fun and engaging presentation on the differences between the four generations currently in the workforce and the fifth one that's coming up behind them. Also, the following month, December 14, we'll be featuring Tim Andrews, the CEO and president of ASI, who gets to put together a list of the 50 most powerful people each year in our industry. And he's taken away some lessons from them and some ideas and what they see as trends. And he wants to share that with us on December 14th. So mark your calendars for those upcoming dates and Wild Wednesday webinars. Today, I'm really pleased to have my good friend and one of the leaders in creating great social media content, Lisa Horn. I've known Lisa for a long time. She's pretty much from the time she entered the industry. She's the founder of Content Matters, and she writes and teaches courses about content marketing, publishing, publicity, and social media. She's helped a lot of companies in our industry on both sides of the fence to really up their game and become great. She was a former editor on the staff of PPB Magazine, 7 years as the editor, and she's a graduate of Oklahoma State, holds a bachelor's in business administration with a major in marketing, and she's a real magazine and knowledge junkie. So she's got a lot of good tips for you today, and I'm going to let her take it away. Lisa?
All right, thanks, Paul, for that kind introduction. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I'm really excited to share some secrets on what I've learned in my years of writing and being in the industry so that you can help tell your brand story better. So, I kind of help brands get visibility through my love of words. So I blog, I do copywriting, press releases, magazine articles, and I do it with a side of promo products and a little bit of flair. So hopefully that's enjoyable for everyone to read. And it's really kind of hard to believe that I started my career in the promotional products industry more than 22 years ago. I can't be that old, can I? But it all began in Dallas with working at a distributor, and I managed much of the promotional product sales there and managed our company stores. And after 4 years there, I wanted to incorporate more writing into my work. So I answered an ad in the newspaper, dating myself back before there was the internet to find a job. And I got hired on at PPB Magazine. And so I was there for almost 10 years, and 7 of that was as the editor of the flagship publication. So I got a lot of great experience working for the magazine, and got to know a lot of great industry people like Paul from way back in, I think it was 1999 at a Power of Creativity Summit that we both attended. So I was at PPB until 2008, and then I was kind of ready to break out on my own. And since then, like Paul mentioned, I've worked with a number of suppliers and distributors and service providers on their publicity, catalog, social media, and strategic communications. Currently, I'm really focused on a couple projects. One, I'm the editor of the award-winning Corporate Specialties blog. So those of you there in Michigan probably know Valerie Haynes-Sklar with Corporate Specialties. And she and I have worked together for more than 4 years, going on 5, I think it is, in February, working on all the content for her blog. And I just heard from her today that we are finalists for the 3rd consecutive year for the PPAI Technology Award for excellence in our blog content. So super proud and happy about that. The second thing that I work on is a relatively new project this last April, is with a company called Pinoco. You're probably not familiar with them. They're kind of on the fringe of our industry, but they're a laser cutting firm. They have offices in San Francisco and New Zealand. And so my initial role with them was to write specifically about promotional products and how people can work laser cutting custom products into their overall promotional spend. But that role has now kind of expanded, and I'm working on more of their overall blog content. So that's kind of what I've been up to, and hoping that I can take some of those things and pass them along to you. So what are we going to learn today? Well, we've got some takeaways. First, I want to cover what makes good content, where to find it, and then give you some tips for attention-grabbing, clickable headlines. I'm not going to lie, headlines are hard for me. They always have been. So I'm hoping that what I've sort of studied and learned from a lot of other writing gurus will help make your process of writing headlines a little easier. I know it has helped me. Next, after that, we're going to talk about creating an editorial calendar. So essential for keeping your content needs organized and planned, and how to create that. Then we're going to do a little case study. I'm going to tell you about one of the things I'm working on with Pinoco. We've got a 12 Immutable Laws of Event Marketing Swag content series that's a little bit different than anything I've done before, so I thought you might find it interesting too. Finally, we're going to talk a little about competitive advantage and how using content can help you differentiate yourself from your competition. So if you guys want to get social, share your favorite knowledge nuggets. I'd love to know what you guys find most interesting about the presentation. So use the hashtag Wednesday Webinar, @mention me or Paul, and join in the conversation. I've got some tweets scheduled to go out throughout the presentation, so feel free to retweet those and tell me what you love. Okay, so let's dive right in. The more you know about something, the more you care. My husband tells me this all the time, and it's true. So think about some of the things that you are really interested in, whether it's sports or cooking, whatever the topic may be. What is it that really draws you to it? And the more you're drawn to it, the more you want to learn, right? So maybe it's a sports team. While I grew up in Oklahoma and I lived in Dallas for 20 years, I now live in Colorado, and honestly, I've been a Broncos fan since I was little because my dad liked John Elway, and well, I gotta like the same teams my dad does, right? So I've kind of been following Broncos my whole life, and living now finally in Denver, I get all of the Broncos that I want, and it's great because I get to know more about what's going on with the team. You get to know more about what the individual players are doing. And the more you know about that, the more you get into it, the more you care. And so, think about how that ties in to other things. I want to play a quick game with you. I've got two images here on the screen, and I want you to look at them for a second and see if they conjure up any particular emotions or memories or just things. And I'm going to tell you what these two images mean to me. The one on the left, beautiful storm clouds. As I mentioned just a second ago, I grew up in Oklahoma, and my hometown is Yukon. It's the home of Garth Brooks, and no, I've never met him, but I did see him in concert one time at the old Texas Stadium way back in the 90s, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But living in Tornado Alley was obviously a bit scary, but kind of exciting too. And I remember as a kid, my parents would wake me up in the middle of the night and the sirens were going off and the rain was going and there was thunder. And, depending on how severe the storm was, maybe we got underneath the stairs because we didn't have a storm shelter. Or maybe we'd traipse out to our next door neighbors where they had a cellar that we could get into for safety. And for whatever reason, that kind of ingrained in me my love of weather. And I just am fascinated by it. I love learning about it. And, I obviously, tornadoes are extremely serious, and I certainly don't want anyone to, be in the path of one of those big F5s that now happens in Oklahoma all the time, and those are so scary. But I'm fascinated with the power of nature and the beauty of it. So that's one of the things that, from my childhood kind of ingrained in me an interest. And I do have to tell you that if the movie Twister is on cable, I will kind of stop what I'm doing and watch it. So the picture on the right is a concert, and I love music. I am not kidding you. I really am a music lover. And, when I was a kid, there was always music on in my house. Once again, some of these things, ingrained back to when you're a child. But my dad always had music on. And he was kind of a music man. He always had the stereo on, or if we were in the car, he'd turn the music up real loud and make my mom mad. And before he passed away, one of my favorite things to do with him is we would play DJ and get out all these old albums, and we'd take turns playing our favorite songs. And so he was into classic country, like the George Jones and Kenny Rogers, Conway Twitty, Merle Haggard, Willie Nelson kind of things. So while I grew up on country music, and I still listen to that occasionally, I really am a rock and roll kind of girl. I love the Foo Fighters and 30 Seconds to Mars and Daughtry and Fuel. And I've seen those guys several times in concert, and there's something about that energy of a live show that just really makes you feel alive. So I had kind of a deeper appreciation for Foo Fighters and 30 Seconds to Mars because they have each done some documentaries on their experiences. I don't know if you guys watched HBO, but Foo Fighters had a series on where they went around to the various historic recording studios, and they learned all about the history and the backstory and what was recorded there. And then they wrote a song about their experience in that town at the studio. And then at the end, they did an album of all of those songs. And I love it, especially because the backstory to all of those songs. It just makes it so powerful because the more you know about something, the more you care. Well, the same thing about 30 Seconds to Mars. They also did a documentary on where they were having this fight with their record label, and it just uncovered all of these injustices that were happening to recording artists. And they recorded the album This Is War during that time, and each of the songs in there has a meaning. And so that makes me enjoy their music and have more of a connection with them because I understand the backstory. I know more about what they're doing. And those are the kind of connections that you want to make. So what does all of this have to do with creating content for your brand? Well, it's about making connections. People have this innate need to connect with one another. You want to find commonalities with people. You want to hang around people that enjoy the same things, and you want to discover a niche that you really belong in. And so I use the personal examples to showcase things that are unique to me, but you might also have some of the same experiences, so we might have something in common. So perhaps you've experienced a tornado, or you've watched the movie Twister, or you have a musical connection with your family member, or you like to go to concerts. Or maybe you watch the Foo Fighters or 30 Seconds documentaries. Whatever it is, you and I now may have a connection, and that gives us a place to start a conversation. And that's kind of what content is all about. People are looking for connections, so you have to give them a reason to connect with your brand. So what kind of stories are you telling? What kind of things are you putting out there to give customers a way to connect with you in a meaningful way? Obviously we're in the business of selling promotional products, so a lot of our communication is going to be about product. You can't get around that. But if you only communicate about the latest products that are on sale, then you end up as the guy or the gal who sells inexpensive or cheap products. So is that really the story you want to tell? I don't think so. Otherwise, you wouldn't be spending your lunch hour with me today. So what does good content look like? Well, it's all about the audience. You must put your fans first. So before you ever put your fingertips to a keyboard, a pencil to a piece of paper, you have to understand your audience's information needs. What are their pain points? How can you be a resource to make their life easier? And here's the real key. You have to remember that content must be meaningful, relevant, and actionable, but that can only be determined by your audience. So if you've heard me speak before, you've probably heard me say this little line. Instead of crafting messages that you want to say, flip that around and create messages that your customers want to hear. I'm gonna let that sink in for just a second, and I'll repeat. Instead of crafting messages that you want to say, flip that around, create messages that your customers want to hear. So it's a very subtle shift in your thinking. So instead of thinking like a marketer, start thinking like a journalist. So if you take that subtle difference to heart, then you're going to be able to connect with your audience a little bit easier. And I have kind of an example. So a frame of reference that I'm going to use throughout this presentation is creating content around promotional products at a trade show, because that's something pretty universal. We all experience it. Suppliers, you exhibit at trade shows and you're trying to get distributors to come to your booth. Distributors, you may exhibit at shows in the niches where your customers and prospects are, and you probably create programs for your buyers to use as trade shows as a part of their marketing and lead generation programs. Okay, so thinking about writing content about trade shows. Obviously, we're trying to sell products that you can use at trade shows. So historically, and what a lot of people end up doing is you create an email flyer, a blog article, a social post, something about the specials that are going on for these trade show products. So, you've got to, order by a certain deadline date to get these pricing, that sort of thing. Well, that focus is on you and what you want to sell. And it's all about, this lower price and certain date. Okay, so let's flip that concept around and put yourself in the customer's shoes. So your customer wants to increase traffic at their booth, and they know promotional products will help them, but they're not sure what they want, right? So what if we did content like this? 10 tried and true promotional giveaways to have your trade show booth buzzing. Oh, well, that sounds a whole lot more interesting than just here are our trade show product specials, right? Why does this type of content work? Well, first of all, we got tried and true. That sends a message that these items have proven success. That inspires or instills trust. And it also implies that there's not a chance for failure. That's what your customers want. They want to have confidence in what they buy, right? And then to have their trade show booth buzzing, right? That meets the goal, the desire for increasing their booth traffic. So this kind of blog post taps into emotions. A stressed customer can relax now because they know they've made a good decision, and you've helped them make the good decision by educating them with your content. And the emotions play that critical role in being a good storyteller. And here's some really interesting information that I found as I was kind of preparing for this webinar about the science behind great storytelling and tapping into emotions. There's a blog called Writerology, and they have a story called The Brain on Storytelling, Building Emotional Connections. It's written for book authors, but I think it really applies to any kind of storytelling. And here's what the article says. Narrative isn't just found between the pages of a book. Whether you're a writer or not, your life is woven into the stories you tell. It permeates all corners of your existence, from how you see the world to how you interpret other people and how you remember what you've done. To tell stories as humans. Think about 1,000 years ago, there was no internet, no computers. People sat around a campfire and they told stories. They shared oral histories. And so storytelling is ingrained in our DNA, and we need to better utilize that when we're talking about our brands. Okay, back to this article. The significance of narrative raises some interesting questions. What exactly happens in the brain when you're told a story? Is there a difference in brain activity between stories that build an emotional connection and those that don't? And if there is a difference, how can you use that knowledge to form even stronger emotional bonds between your readers and yourself? So the net, because this was a fairly long article, and I am tweeting it out. If you follow me at The Publicity Gal, there are some links to the articles that I'm going to talk about today in this presentation, so you can go read them for yourself if you have any interest. But the bottom line of this particular article was that emotional stories, there ends up being two neurochemicals that are produced in the brain, cortisol and oxytocin. And these chemicals kind of make a useful equation for writers. Basically, it's attention plus empathy equals an emotional connection. And the story goes on to detail some research studies on how people's brains react to certain stories and how capturing attention and raising tension and establishing empathy work to draw people in. So if you tell a story in the right way and you can hook a reader's attention, gain their empathy, and create an emotional bond that influences them, then you'll have that connection long after they've read their content. And that's what we want as marketers is to try to build those connections with our audience. So the emotional connection is really the key for turning your prospects into customers and then those customers into your brand advocates. So what can content do when you have the right kind of connection? So I've got just a brief list here. It can help tell your story, educate your audience, attract buyers, overcome objections, build buzz, create trust, increase loyalty, and convert sales. So of course you're going to have a number of goals that you want to accomplish with your content, and maybe all of these things on the list. And you'll want to develop content to address each of those goals, and you want to combine a variety of content with purpose for your content. And of course, everyone does want to increase sales, and your content can help direct your prospects through the sales cycle. But, if you're too salesy, that's a big turnoff. So instead, look for the story behind the sale. Don't sell. Address your customers' needs, help solve their problems, offer advice, write about your experience, give examples of what works and what didn't. So all that sounds great, right? Well, how do we do all this? So finding content, it is easier than you think. And I know some of you are over there, Lisa, come on, I'm a marketer, I'm a salesperson, I'm a business owner, I am not a writer, I can't write. Well, here's what I say to you guys. Whether you say you can or you can't, you're right. So take away those self-limiting beliefs. Think about this. You have conversations with customers all day long. I know salespeople, and you guys are great storytellers. So think about your blog content as a conversation. So you're casually having dinner or drink and you're telling stories. You put that frame of reference into thinking about how you can develop content, then identifying story ideas just got a whole lot easier. For me, content ideas are everywhere. I sometimes don't know where to start because I've got so many ideas. Now, granted, I know I'm the exception and not the rule, but if you use that kind of broad approach and open your mind to what can be turned into content, you're going to have more ideas than you ever imagined. So let's take a look at some of these things. Case histories, one of the most powerful forms of content. Now, I know about the paranoia in our industry about how people don't want to share whatever promotions that they've come up with because they are afraid that somebody's going to steal the idea or steal the customer. And I understand you have to do what's best for your business, and that is a personal decision. But from a communication standpoint with your customers, case histories are one of the most powerful things that you can share. Why? Because it's unique to you. No other blog out there is going to be talking about a particular promotion because this is the one you created. So you don't have any competition for that kind of content. It showcases your creativity and your expertise while it gives your customers idea. So there's a couple people in the industry that I thought have really done a good job. If you guys know Robin Promotions, R-O-B-Y-N, Robin Promotions in Oklahoma City, I have always liked their case histories. And when I was checking out their website, they haven't done a whole lot lately. Nonetheless, the ones that they have done, I find to be very well written. They take a narrative approach, so it's more like a human interest story, and they have lots of photos, and I just think they're really well done. So if you want to see an example, you may want to check that out. Right Sleeve is another company that has done a few case histories. In fact, they just posted one about Quark Expeditions, and they did these camper mugs, and I really like it. If anyone's Right Sleeve is listening, I wouldn't mind having one. Shameless plug, I know. But they take a traditional approach. They talk about the client, then they give the objective, then they talk about the solutions they provided, and then the overall results. So case histories are a fantastic thing to do when it comes to creating content. FAQs. If you have certain things that your customers are always asking you, well, then there's probably opportunity for education on that particular topic. And conversely, if there are things that your customers never ask you, but they should, then you've got another opportunity to create some content that offers a solution that they may not have previously considered. You can also talk about how can you do promotions better. You know, everybody wants their giveaways, their promotions, their marketing campaigns to be more successful. So what kind of ideas do you have that can help them achieve that kind of goal? This last weekend, I was in Oklahoma City visiting some family, and I'm a runner, and I just did my 19th half marathon a couple weeks ago, so I'm pretty stoked about that. But while in Oklahoma City, I like to run a race wherever I am if I'm traveling. And so there was the Komen Race for the Cure 5K. And so I got my mom and my cousin to go do it with me. And after the race, we're kind of walking around, and they had a little expo, and of course there was vendors with booths there. And it was interesting for two of the booths, when they were giving away their particular promotional products, they had one of the little spinning wheels. And the first one was Gold's Gym. And so you had to spin the wheel to determine what particular promotional prize that you got. And then Komen had their own booth, and you had to spin the wheel and answer a question about breast cancer awareness in order to get the promotional products that they were offering, which one of them was a bag from Bag Makers, and I am in love with it. I have used it this last week during my travels, and I'm a big fan, so I was actually really happy to have that. So, you know, rather than just giving stuff away with no conversation, these two particular companies at their exhibit booth, you know, used the little spinning wheel to have more engagement with people who came by their booth, and you know, make it a better experience for everyone involved. So, you know, things like that. How can your customers do promo better? Of course, you're going to have to talk about product, but try to find a way to make it interesting for your audience. I'm going to go back to the Right Sleeve example. Those guys do an on-trend Tuesday where they talk about products that are, you know, particularly trendy right now. And then for me, one of the things that I do for corporate specialties, Valerie and I came up with, you know, we wanted to do products we love and tell why we love these products. Make it personal. You know, what's so special about this product that I would really like to have it and use it, and focus a little bit more on the application of how this product can be used in a marketing situation, rather than, you know, just here are the product stats and the colors it comes in and the imprint size. So we try to make it more interesting in that way. You can also go, you know, kind of behind the scenes of things that are happening at your company. That helps also make it personal and start developing those connections, because they get to know more about what's going on within your business and just not, you know, the sales component. So, you know, maybe you talk about new hires or employment anniversaries or some sort of celebration you're having. Maybe you're expanding, or you've received some awards, or you're doing something with a charitable organization. You may also look at the other types of things that you're doing. Maybe you've got a big fulfillment job, and so you can create some content about, well, here's how we do our fulfillment. So it's interesting because you get to know the backstory of how things are done, but then subtly it's like, well, oh, if they're doing this kind of fulfillment, maybe they can do that for me. And those are the type of connections that you want to make, both from an emotional standpoint, but also with a business goal in mind. Obviously, you can look at current events. What's going on? So, you know, this last summer we had the Olympics. So maybe companies were wanting to do some sports competition type things. Obviously, we got a lot of political stuff going on right now, and I am sure that there's been some tie-into promotions that are, you know, politically based. Also, holidays. You know, that the holidays at the end of the year is obviously a very busy time for most of us in the industry. So there's content that you can create around that. And then also look at kind of fun days. You know, National Handwriting Day is in January on John Hancock's birthday. So maybe you talk about pens on that day. Or National Pet Day is April 11th. And look at all of the fun pet promos that are out there. Or we just had National Donut Day the last Monday of September, and I saw all kinds of stuff on social media about that. So maybe you tie into some things like that that are current. Also research, PPAI and ASI have great research on why promotional products work. And one of the things that I do at Corporate Specialties is we are fairly regular about doing some research posts, and we use a combination. Sometimes we'll use industry research, and then sometimes we will look at other research studies outside the industry, but just talking about business in general. And we take that information and then give our take on it, give our spin on it, and how promotional products can be used in a particular situation. So if we're talking about how there's a real lack of employee engagement in companies these days, well, how can promotional products be implemented and incorporated into companies' internal communications plan to help improve employee engagement? So there's ways to create content around that as well. And then of course publications. You look at the information that's put out by our industry publications, mainstream media, business magazines, or niche publications that your audience reads. And maybe you create some content around stories that you find in there as inspiration, but then give your particular opinion on the matter and figure out a way of how that fits in with the promotional products that you're selling. So I know that's a lot to take in, and we're getting ready to have some more fun because the next part is headlines. Getting attention with eye-catching headlines. And I mentioned earlier, headlines are tough for me. And so I've spent quite a bit of time reading lots of different posts on different ways to formulate headlines. And I have to tell you, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with some of the techniques. From a creative standpoint, it's like, oh, I don't want to do another list headline. But whenever I go searching for something, for example, I was searching for some images for this presentation, and I wanted, some free images that were had common anyway, the free images. And so of course I am attracted to the posts that had like 14 free image websites. So while I might hate that from a creative standpoint, when I'm looking for something, they are particularly useful. So you kind of have to balance it out. And here's the interesting thing about headlines. You guys are probably familiar with the blog Upworthy, and they published an article last year about their editorial process. And the number one thing on their list was, and I quote, "You have to crap out 25 headlines for every piece of content." What? 25 headlines for somebody who doesn't like to write a headline? That's awful. So they go on to say, well, obviously some of your headlines are going to stink. And once you get desperate, you will get creative. Number 24 will suck, but number 25 will be a gift from the headline gods and will make you a legend. Well, maybe, maybe not. But you do have to accept that every headline won't be perfect and write the 25 headlines anyway. Arg. All right, so the reason this is so important is on average, 5 times as many people read the headline as read the body copy. And when you have written your headline, you've spent 80 cents of your dollar. David Ogilvy, who was a very famous ad man, said that, and it's true. It's if you don't have a headline that is captivating enough for somebody to stop what they're doing and take the time to spend with you, then you're creating content for no one other than yourself, and that's not the point. Okay. So I knew that I needed to put my money where my mouth is. And so I gave you some techniques to write effective headlines. Now, there's not 25 here. There's what? So there's 14. And I wrote headlines. So here we go. Just to give you a feel of what different headlines look like. And we're going to go back to our trade show content concept. Okay, so the first is how to. Well, that's pretty self-explanatory. How to create a tiered giveaway program for your next trade show. That's pretty self-explanatory. If I want to have inexpensive giveaway for the masses, and then I have a certain level of customer that needs something a little nicer, and then I have my VIPs who need something a little nicer than that. So how do I go about it? That's the kind of article you'd write to do that. Numbers, people love numbered posts. And it really is an easy way to help set up what you're going to talk about. So here's one. The one that we did earlier, 10 tried and true promotional giveaways to have your trade show booth buzzing. Yeah, I love that one. Ways to do more. Get more leads at your next trade show with these promotional strategies. Or maybe get more leads at your next trade show with these 3 promotional strategies. So you can kind of combine some of these techniques to get what you're looking for. All right, here's one for ways to do better. Do trade show promotions better. 5 ways to create buzz on the exhibit floor. Look at common mistakes, because a lot of times, learning things the hard way makes for a better read, honestly. So how about top 3 trade show giveaway mistakes that make your promotion fail? Well, see, that taps into that failure emotion, and nobody wants to have a promotion that fails. So, that makes that a highly clickable article. Must-haves. This is an actual title that I wrote, I think, about 2.5 or 3 years ago for one of my corporate specialties blog posts. Ready, set, show. 5 must-haves for your next trade show exhibition. Signs and symptoms. 7 sure signs your event swag needs help now. Well, yeah, you don't want to have a sickly promotion, do you? No, of course not. You want to get it fixed immediately. Of course, lists, and you've probably seen some of the bigger list posts out there, and those are highly successful. So, maybe it's something like 25 easy things that make trade show promotions more successful, because that's something that people hopefully would bookmark and come back to as a reference whenever they're planning their next event. Lessons learned. So how about lessons learned from the worst trade show giveaway experience ever? Wouldn't you want to read that? Oh my gosh, what was the worst trade show experience ever? Okay, well, let's hear about it. So that's got that kind of curiosity gap in it too, because people want to know what was so bad, and then how can it be better so that they don't make those same mistakes. Maybe a favorite tool. 5 trusted tools to improve your event swag. Checklists are really great too, because that helps give people confidence that they haven't missed anything. So the must-have trade show promotion checklist for your best exhibition yet. Wouldn't you want to have your best exhibition yet? Of course you would. So once again, you're tying into those emotions about wanting to succeed. Maybe your audience are beginners. If so, maybe you do something about the beginner's guide to getting started with trade show promos. That's a primer to give them the foundation of knowledge that they need in order to make the right product selection, and will help make your job in working with them easier. Everyone likes to know a secret. We used it for this particular webinar. So what about the secret behind ABC Company's amazing trade show promotions? So that's a case history, right? And you want to know what was so special about their success, so that you could maybe implement that into your next trade show. Curiosity. What happened when ABC Company tried this trade show promotion strategy? You'll never believe these results. You've seen those headlines like on BuzzFeed, and they're highly successful because you are giving people just a hint that there's something really cool, but you got to click to read. I also did one bonus headline. I had an extra that came to mind. So the bonus is 3 things you need to think about before choosing event swag. Whew, well, let me tell you, that was a tough exercise. I'm not going to lie. But this gives you a feel of how you can take one concept of promotions at trade shows and look at all of the different twists that we can put on it based on the headline. So you may have your story idea and concept written and you're looking for headlines, but you may also be able to flip it around. I thought this was a really useful exercise to use as a brainstorming to come up with, well, we know we need to write about some trade show marketing because a lot of our customers do that. So what can we write about? Well, go through these various techniques, see what you come up with, and feel free to steal some of the ideas I just threw out there. And that'll help generate of those, even more of those ideas. There's a magazine out there called Blinkist, and they put the theory to the test of this writing the 25 headlines. And I did tweet out a link to the story so that you can see what their experience was, which headlines that they wrote worked and why, if you have any interest for going further into that particular topic. So anyway, check at the Publicity Gal if you want to see that link. All right. Content planning. Editorial calendars are essential. I cannot stress enough about how important an editorial calendar is. And it doesn't have to be complicated, but the really writing on the fly typically doesn't work. Knowing that, okay, well, I committed to myself that I'm going to put a blog post out every other Wednesday, and here it is Tuesday night at 10 o'clock, and I don't have a blog post for tomorrow, and what am I going to write? That just creates a lot of stress, and then you may or may not have the greatest ideas, and you might not be telling the story that you want to tell, right? Now, that's not to say that you're not going to have the occasional story idea that you can't wait to write, and it's super great. But let's be honest, most of the time you need to put some strategic thought into the messages that you craft. So you need to have a variety of topics while you stay within your niche, and so that you speak to your audience. And one of the things I would encourage you to do is look at the breakdown of your sales and the people who buy. So here's an example. Maybe 60% of your sales come from restaurants, 20% from B2B, 10% from golf courses, 5% from schools, and then 5% is just the rest of the miscellaneous. So you'd want to build content in those proportions, because if the majority of your work is coming from restaurants, then the majority of your content should be addressing that audience. Now, of course, you may want to adjust those proportions slightly depending on if you're trying to build a segment. So maybe, right now you're only selling to 10% of the golf courses, but you are really going after that market. Well, then you'd want to develop content in those areas a little more. But that gives you a place to start when you're looking at your particular audience, your niche, and in general who you're talking to. So the benefits of an editorial calendar, it helps you to stay accountable, and it puts writing on your to-do list so that it doesn't get pushed to the side. It also helps you determine workflow. And depending on the size of your company, and if you're the one doing the writing, or if maybe you are outsourcing it to a freelancer, or maybe having someone else on your staff write, you can help track assignments with the editorial calendar, and then you can track topics, because you want your content to be easy to find when you're in the process of maybe putting a sales presentation together and you want to direct your prospect to read a couple articles. We've been talking about this, and this. You want to easily be able to find those types of articles when you're in a sales situation, and having an editorial calendar that you can search will help facilitate that whole process. So what do you include on your editorial calendar? Well, these are my must-haves. First, you got to have the dates, whether that is the draft due date from whoever's writing it, the approved by date, the publication date. If you are working with multiple contributors, you obviously need to know who the author is going to be. The working title. This doesn't have to be your final headline, because as we know, you need to go write 25 of those bad boys before you post anything. But so whatever the working title is, just a summary, maybe a couple sentences of just the general gist of what the article is going to be. One of the things that I find helpful is determining categories for the content. So one of the things that I worked with Valerie at Corporate Specialties on is when we were at the very beginning stages of planning our content strategy, it's like, all right, well, let's determine what categories we want to write on a regular basis, and then we can figure out within those categories what we want to write. So our strategy was we have a product we love, we have a research post, we have a feature that can, that's sort of open-ended on anything that we want to do. And then we have something specifically on marketing and branding. That was our strategy. That's what worked for her audience and her sales process. Yours is probably going to be different, and you don't need to copy us, but you do need to come up with categories that make sense to your audience. And then that kind of making a silo like that helps give you some direction when you start planning. You also want to look at particular tags. Those are going to be your keywords. And so for SEO purposes, you do want to have keywords strategically placed in your content. Of course, not overloading with keywords and doing those sorts of things, because Google figures that out and is smarter, but you do need to have the appropriate keywords in there. Once the blog post is published, I like to keep that final URL in my editorial calendar so I can go back and reference that easily. And then I also create social posts within that particular document so that I can track what we've said socially. Okay, I gotta get going. I know we've only got 13 minutes left, and I got a couple things to continue telling you. Okay, real quick. This quick case study about Pinocchio. The reason I wanted to bring this up was that it's a little bit different than anything I've written before. And when they hired me, he had a very specific direction that he wanted to go. And as a laser cutting manufacturer, they were getting requests to do promotional products for events. And so when trying to figure out what can we do that's different that no one else is doing while tapping into the unique resources that Pinocchio has, they came up with this concept. And so it's the 12 immutable laws of event marketing swag. And what we've done is we've created obviously 12 posts. We're technically on post number, we just published number 6, so we're kind of halfway through developing the content portion of this. And each of the 12 principles builds upon one another. So at the end of the day, there's a solid plan that somebody can follow to have better swag at their events. And so we're looking at things like this. We did Law 1 was incorporating good design. Law 2, align with brand DNA. Law 3, be strategic. Law 4, have a goal and purpose. Law 5, target a specific audience. Law 6, be different from competitors. Law 7, think custom, not commodity. Law 8, add personalization. Law 9, don't forget presentation. Law 10, enhance the event experience. Law 11, add pizzazz and make it shareable. And Law 12, have fun and enjoy the process. But here's where things really got fun. So do you guys remember show and tell like at elementary school? So, we like that whole thing. So in addition to just telling people about what the laws are in a traditional narrative, we wanted to show them how the laws can be implemented. And so we came up with some ideas for event giveaways using some of the world's top tech brands as examples. So we designed sample product ideas for iconic brands like Google and Apple and Microsoft that could be used at an upcoming event. And so the challenge was, all right, let's design something that's truly custom that fits the example brand like a glove. And we wanted to bake in the DNA of the brand plus the audience plus the event. To further the challenge, we wanted the products to be to achieve a measurable marketing goal and be different from every other promotional product at the event, and also be different from every other promotional product that the brand had used before. And of course, it has to be packable in your luggage because you're traveling, and it's no good if recipients can't take it home. And of course, there's no endorsement of the products by the brands represented. All we wanted to do was tell a story of what is possible by brands if they put in some creativity into the process. So the goal is basically creating kind of a new breed of promotional product that reinvents how brands market themselves. Now, what happens next? Well, we're not sure. We're just through Law 6, and we've just started the email campaign to support it. So I can't tell you how well it's working quite yet. But the point of the story is to illustrate how you can come up with a concept and demonstrate your expertise and your skill base with a completely different twist that's totally unique to this particular company. No one else can tell this story because it is unique to Pinoco, and that's what I wanted to inspire you with, to think about what you do that is completely unique to you and help you tell that story. Okay, getting here to the end. Be different. And we kind of have a world of sameness, and so you have to stand out to be competitive. And I didn't really intend on using the Leaning Tower of Pisa as an image, but I saw it and I thought, oh my gosh, that's perfect, because obviously the Leaning Tower of Pisa is beautiful. It's got great architecture. It's an amazing structure. But would it be that popular if it was straight? People would see it when they went to Pisa, and they would take pictures of it, and it would be beautiful, but it wouldn't be famous. Its imperfection is what makes it so awesome, because there's nothing else like it in the world. And so that's my challenge to you guys, is think about what really makes you different and how can you stand out from the competition because of your differences. So, unfortunately, a lot of promotional consultants, to the untrained eye of the buyer, look the same, because there's not a lot of points of differentiation. And then what happens? People start to differentiate on price, and that's not our goal. So the goal is to get people to value your creativity and come to you for ideas, as opposed to just being the product person. The final little article I want to reference was in Inc. It's called 3 Important Ways to Be Different and Work to Your Competitive Advantage. And he talks about how price is the last differential of the similar. And he's got some really good commentary about that. And if you're different and in an authentic and meaningful way, you'll be able to base your price off the unique values you give. And since this difference is unique to you, it will be much harder to copy or undercut for your competitors. So once again, creating that difference with content helps that process along. And one of the other things that he says is that a leader is always different first. If you're truly different, you are always in the first place of your niche. So that's tough. That's a tall order, right? But it gives everyone something to strive to and how they want to be seen as a leader to their customers. So finally, a little quote of positivity. This also came from this Inc. Article. Og Mandino is the author of The Greatest Salesman in the World book. And I have not read that, but I was inspired by his quote because it ties into being unique and different, but it also validates all of our uniqueness and puts some positive energy out there in the universe. So I am rare, and there is value in all rarity. Therefore, I am valuable. And you are all so valuable, and I thank you so much for spending your valuable time with me. I really enjoyed it. Oh my gosh, we got 6 minutes left. Any questions?
Actually, we had a couple of questions. I'll throw you the softball first.
Okay, softball.
Do you offer these services to industry folks to blog for them?
I do. Although I will tell you that at this point, my calendar is pretty full, but I'm always open to discuss opportunities.
Okay, fantastic. And the other one is, how does someone who knows very little about Twitter, Snapchat, and all the other social media platforms that are coming out today, how do they learn how to use them? And, he said, the comment was, this stuff sounds great for those who already know how to use those systems. Any tips or advice there?
Well, I am a Twitter lover. I will say that from the get-go. I have gotten into Snapchat basically because I just am kind of too busy, I guess, and just haven't really felt the need. I will, but but I don't want to discredit it because um, it is very popular depending on your audience. There are a certain segment that is all over Snapchat, so that's something that you have to pay attention to if that's where your audience. Uh, how I learned about Twitter, well, I just jumped in with both feet, and I think um, just when you're talking about any kind of social media, don't don't fear it. Um, of course, you need to be smart about what you say, and I just caution you about trying to be funny sometimes because that doesn't often translate. But there are so many articles on how to use Twitter and how to make it better. I would check out Social Media Examiner. They're usually a really great source for kind of what's happening in the latest in the world of social media, and I believe that they have all kinds of tutorials and things on there. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking maybe HubSpot, HUBSPOT. I think they've got some social media tutorials on their blog. They have a lot of really great content just in general, and they've got white papers and that sort of thing too. So if you haven't checked out HubSpot just for your general knowledge, that's also a great source. Um, that's kind of all I can think of off the top of my head. What I'll do is when we get done here, let me find a couple um, great Twitter tutorials and um, and I'll tweet those out. So just go to Twitter/ThePublicityGal and I'll put a couple links out there and maybe that'll help.
Okay. And for those of you who don't know how to use Twitter, I'll monitor that and put them together for you. I'm not a big Twitter user myself. I use it primarily when I can't get any help from a major corporation and need to get attention. I've found that Twitter is the best way to get companies like Comcast or United Airlines to pay attention to you. Got another question out there. Do you use tags consistently, for example, of the same tags in all posts, or do you change them up based on the post?
Well, sort of yes to both. I do have a consistent list of tags that I use, but it is also dependent on the post. So, for example, let's look at our trade show marketing blog post. So maybe the tags for that could be trade shows, trade show marketing, um, event swag, um, promotional giveaways, things like that. But then if I was writing on, say, something for restaurants, then I would change the tags for that particular audience and that particular type of content. So I would encourage you to, um, as you're planning your content and looking at um, what your particular niches are, creating a list of keywords that would be appropriate for use within the story as well as use as tags, and then be consistent. So whenever I write about trade shows, I might use these 4 words. And whenever I write about general business branding, I'm going to use these 4. And then whenever I write about restaurant marketing, I'm going to use these. And there's no magic number as far as keywords or tags. Um, it's there actually could be some research out there as far as an optimal number. I don't know what that is. That would require Google search to see if there's um, any statistical information on that, but generally I usually do somewhere between 3 and 5 tags per post, just as a rule. I don't know why I do it that way. That's just, it seemed reasonable, I guess.
And from a purely selfish Wild Wednesday webinar standpoint, have you created a presentation around effective use of Twitter yet?
Well, I did one for PPAI back in the day, like maybe 4 or 5 years ago. It seems like I'd have to go look.
Okay,
But
well,
I do
I've got
remember
I've got
writing.
I've got 4 dates left open in 2017, so we'd love to have you back.
I guess you better pencil me in for a Twitter tutorial because I could talk about Twitter all day. I love it.
Well, if you want my slot next month, I'm pretty flexible as well, but we can talk about that offline. Well, we're
I need a break.
yeah. We're at that point, folks. I really appreciate everyone attending today's Wild Wednesday webinar, and thank you, Lisa, for providing such terrific content about content. That was really good.
Oh, thanks, guys. I hope you learned something. It was super fun for me. I loved it. Give me a shout out if you're on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on SlideShare. So yeah, give me a shout. Send me a note. Love to hear from you guys.
All right, thank you. I'd like to remind everyone that next month's Wild Wednesday webinar is November 30. Your presenter is going to be none other than myself. I'll be doing my How to Sell to Any Generation presentation, which reviews the things that affected each of the generations and how to best communicate with them, with, of course, everybody's favorite, the MELLENIALs, the millennials. We also offer CAS credits for today's webinar if you fill out the survey as you leave. And once again, thank you for attending. We'll talk to you next month. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.